All right, listeners, thanks for tuning back into the Building It Online podcast. Bryce and Mike here with you today. And today we've got Joseph Fung, who is the founder of Uvaro. Joseph, thanks for joining us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bryce. Michael, this is going to be a fun chat. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So you've been able to go from you've started multiple companies, you've had
Mhm.
multiple successful exits. So you've really had quite a journey to with your kind of entrepreneurial career at this stage.
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky. I've had a chance to work with some really good people and had some fortunate outcomes. But man, I confess, you never lose the imposter syndrome. It feels fresh every time.
So Uvaro is your what number of company are you on here?
Depending if you include the one that we turned into a not-for-profit because we couldn't make it work, 5 or 6.
Okay. So
Tell
how
us
do
about
you
that.
So one of our first ventures, we were building web software, and we were building discussion forum software. You remember using discussion forums as like the big thing? They still hang around,
Like
but
Instant
yeah.
Messenger and whatnot.
Well, yeah, even less than instant messenger, but like those old bulletin boards where people are posting replies, it's all threaded. Yeah. So we had
Yeah.
software that did that. And we knew we wanted to use an open source model. Like, hey, share out software, get everyone to contribute. And by that time, we tried to turn on the paid offerings and the paid solutions. The community was so focused on free. Everyone rebelled. They're like, oh my God, you're turning corporate. And we just couldn't. And finally, we're like, okay, you know what? Screw it. Turning it into a not for profit. Let's go do the next thing.
That's cool.
Nice, man. So how'd you kind of get started in all this? What was your first company like?
I mean, I've always had entrepreneurial parents, and so I think I got a good example there. So it was never a scary thing. So really, the real trigger, I was on an internship in the summer. I was working at a big military contractor, Raytheon. They had a new president coming, and everyone was scared out of it. There's no polite way to put it. They were scared shitless. They were for like, is he going to clear the plant? Is he going to close it? Are we going to lose our jobs? And I mean, I'm a student. Something crap. I can do better than this. I can run a company where people aren't scared. And that was really the trigger. It was like, you know what? Let's take this kind of software freelancing thing we're doing and let's actually turn it into a company. That was the real gestalt for it.
That's a pretty
Okay.
big transfer to go from Raytheon to entrepreneur. I feel like people spend their lives like trying to get in and up at Raytheon or some of those big organizations now.
Yeah, it's totally true. And I mean, doing really cool work. It was really fun. But, you know, I've always felt that work shouldn't be and you totally get this from your family. I mean, work shouldn't be the thing you feel like you have to do. It's the thing you're doing it because you enjoy it. You're making a big impact. You're accomplishing and building cool things. And so it was never this big, daunting, scary thing. It was just something that people did. And that trigger was a big, impactful one. I was like, you know what? I don't want to be working at a place where people feel like this. I want to create a
Right.
place where people feel more fulfilled, aligned, and
Not
get
like a
excited.
number.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So what do your parents do? You said they kind of brought you up in this entrepreneurship mindset. What do they do?
Yeah, so as I grew up, my mother was running a financial services business. So financial planning, insurance, wealth management. My father was running a mechanical contracting company. So if you think about like all those ducts that Bruce Willis was crawling through in Die Hard, like installing stuff like that. And I got a chance to work with both of them as I grew up and saw
Nice.
what it was like to run those businesses.
Okay.
Nice.
And then once you started launching your own company, what was your first company?
So the first was custom software development, and so we were building websites that could be updated on their own, applications to help with like mapping or product listing, really early e-commerce sites, and so all of it was custom development, and we were always hoping to build our own products that we could sell again and again. And after doing custom development for several years, we were able to productize one of our content management solutions, and so started selling just that product, which is pretty cool. We turned it from a services company to a product company, and all of the pains and tribulations along that path.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So it sounds like you went from like an agency to just basically taking some of your services and turning it into your own product.
Yeah, very much. And we started primarily selling it directly to businesses. And the whole idea was it was like a competitor to WordPress before WordPress was really a thing. And as we built the business, we started selling not just directly to the people who owned websites, but people who built websites. So we would sell to design agencies as a white labeled solution. And it was really cool. We had everything from like mom and pop design shops who now had their own content management system to we had the BlackBerry product management group was using our CMS as theirs, which was super, super cool. And then we sold it to our largest reseller. So that was a fun journey.
Was the transition from like the agency to the product model, was that super clear to you? Or is that like at the time, like maybe we should go left, maybe we should go right, and then you had to make a decision? Or
so the goal was always clear. Like we knew the goal was we need to figure out how to make our work more repetitive and make our revenues more repetitive without scaling the work. And I think a lot of people in an agency world see that. How do you productize more of your work? How to get there though, that was murky. We didn't have any real clear idea. It took a lot of trials and tribulations before we hit the nail on the head there.
That's exciting.
How long did that transition take you?
The journey took us, just thinking back, really I'd say it took a good solid 2 to 3 years to navigate that transition. A large part of it was the testing of the messaging, the testing of the sales motion, and really just learning like really basic early things around how to run a company. Like how do we do payroll? How do we send invoices? How do we deal with the random crap that happens? Because wow, we got random crap. We had a music label in Chicago who would always call us up and sitting in like this suburban small office. One of my founders would always pick up this like Chicago rap accent while he was talking to the phone. And so like we talked to a client where the person on the other line was Big Mama D. We got cease and desist letters from the CIA because people using our software were writing about terrorist plots for weird random reasons. So figuring out how you run a business where people are using your software to put shit on the internet is really hard because you get a lot of random stuff. So yeah.
Are you saying that you guys, you didn't sit down the first day and think to yourself like, all right, possible outcomes, like someone's going to write terrorist information here, we should be prepared?
No, it was not something that was in our business plan. Yeah. We really should have done that.
That's wild.
So that's really cool, man. So it sounds like you went from this transition of building software, turn into a product, and then like learned how to run a business along the way with that first company. So how did that transition into like the second and the third company?
So one of the things we did not do a good job at early on was keeping life simple. So we're running this custom software shop. It's kind of cranking along. We're selling through resellers. Of course, we say, hey, life isn't busy enough. So with one of our partner firms, we launched a joint venture together. We're like, hey, we know how to build web software. We can do this again. So we actually launched our second company while we were still running our first. So doing the two simultaneously was definitely a challenge. That second company was set up a lot cleaner. We implemented a lot of the lessons. We did a much better job on the sales and the marketing side of things. That one we actually lined up to sell to one of our biggest competitors, and then the sale fell apart at the last minute. So it was like two bootstrapped companies where clearly we'd learned the lessons through the process. And it was exhausting, it was tough. So I took a break for a couple of years, and then the next business we launched was venture-backed. So figure out how do we design this to be a lot better, investable from the outside, and much more scalable from the beginning. And so I think each time we've launched a company, we've folded those lessons in. And so I'd like to think we're getting better at it each step of the way.
So how many is that for you now, companies that you've started?
So the one we open sourced, custom software, the third, the one that we had launched simultaneously, was effectively like a social network for your neighborhood.
Okay.
So
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, less about sharing cat memes and conspiracy theories and more about things like, where's a good place to walk your dog? What's the local garbage pickup time? I need a babysitter. Let's post a classified ad, that kind of stuff.
My dad uses that a lot where he lives. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's totally super cool.
I'm super curious about the differences between bootstrapping, like at least the mental differences between starting a company in the early stages with the mindset of bootstrapping versus the mindset of venture-backed, because I've been a part of both. And the venture-backed is like just the focus of the CEO is so different, going after, pitch after pitch and getting things ready in that sense versus making the product day after day. So I'm interested at your insight on that.
It's totally different. I think there's strengths and weaknesses to both perspectives. And I see things that I do now that my venture-backed peers aren't doing because they don't have the bootstrap experience, and vice versa. There's things I'm doing that bootstrap companies can't do because they don't have that external money.
Right.
Two things that jump out. Number one, a visceral understanding of the consequences. Hey, when you're doing a venture-backed startup, when you're running one, you're to a certain extent playing with other people's money. So it's not always your money that's in the pot. You're generally getting paid well. You don't have the same view of the consequences of your decisions. I mean, I think about as a bootstrap company, I remember taking cash advances on my credit card so that I could make payroll. It's like you're going to that bank machine and you're putting your credit card in, you're like, that interest rate is terrible and the fee is terrible. And you're thinking, crap, I got to make payroll. And what does it mean when you mess up your bookkeeping system and things like that?
Right.
On the venture-backed side, you don't think about those consequences. You don't think about when we bootstrap our company, one of our founders, because your founders, your partners, you get paid last. One of my co-founders early on in the process, one year, realized he couldn't put his kid into hockey that year for the season because we didn't make enough money for ourselves.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just like, oh shit, we're not doing very, very well. And now his kid doesn't get to play hockey.
Yet the company was probably doing okay still, right? Because you guys are last in line.
That's it. Yeah, people are getting paid. Clients are happy. Things are working. It's stressful, but yeah. So the consequences are very different. But then on the flip side, even just thinking about scale and being able to invest early on, like one of the things I saw us do in a bootstrap company is you cut some corners with processes. Like when you get paid last, you make decisions about, okay, let's not get a full-time bookkeeper. We'll figure it out ourselves. You maybe don't have the cleanest filing systems, things like that. But when you go to sell a venture-backed company, that stuff makes a huge difference. Like, I'll give you an example. An entrepreneur that didn't do this, didn't invest in the bookkeeping, the processes, venture-backed company, goes to sell the company. And the original offer was about $40 million. And we were going through the sale of our company at about the same time. And we were selling ours for more in the mid-30s. So close, but not identical. In the sales process of our company, we were able to increase the total value. Whereas on his side, at the tail end, he's like, I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to do this. They're finding all these issues in the bookkeeping and things like that. And they ended up having to take a haircut of almost $3 million on the deal. Wow. And it's like, okay, great. When you're selling a company for $40 million, $3 million doesn't sound a lot. But when you think about, man, I could have hired that $50,000 bookkeeper to actually clean up some of these issues. When you have that external financing, they're always pushing you to think about scale and you make different decisions.
That's pretty nuts. So on a just kind of surface level, would you say that venture-backed or bootstrapping is more stressful?
At any given time, I'm always pushing my envelope. So if I think about the stresses I had then and the stresses I had now, I think I feel the same amount of stress. I'm sure I'm probably drinking just as much alcohol, as much coffee. And my wife probably sees, as many lines forming as either. The part that's interesting that I don't think a lot of people consider is when you're running a bootstrap company, you're always thinking about cash. Yeah, which means, it's a lot harder for things to fail catastrophically because you're bringing in cash. Even if you go on vacation, there's still some cash coming in. Things get a little bit ugly, but the company is kind of like default alive. There's a great blog post about default alive, default dead. In a venture-backed company, you're investing in growth. And so what that means is you're spending on marketing, you're spending on sales well ahead of that cash coming in. So really, you're kind of like digging your own grave, watching for when you can kind of rebalance the costs and get to profitability. So when things go bad in a venture-backed company, they go bad fast. And so that's the part it's a slightly different stress. On the venture-backed side of things, you feel the anxiety about taking your hands off the wheel a lot more because the failure mode is just very, very quick.
That's interesting. I've never thought about it from that angle.
It's like, when you're running a bootstrap company, your expenses and your revenues are often very close. And so if your revenues are tightening, you can tighten up the expenses a little bit more. In a venture-backed company, your expenses eclipse your revenues generally, like in the first many stages. And so when things are going bad, you just don't have a lot of options.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
is your current company now venture-backed or bootstrapped?
It is, yes. We've been lucky enough to have investors that are founders, entrepreneurs, investors from my last companies. We're very fortunate where we had that opportunity to choose our investors.
Okay.
So I have a question about bringing that to new entrepreneurs. So if there's someone that's getting started in the space today and doesn't know which route to take, right? Should I go get investment or should I just figure it out on my own? Is being venture backed something that you can do as a new person into business, or do you need 3 companies that just to get the idea of invoicing and payroll and those kind of items under your belt before you should actually go talk to investors?
That's a really, really good question. Ultimately, angel investors, venture investors are like professional gamblers. I mean, their job is to go and kind of place bets. And sometimes, some people like placing the bets on a more experienced entrepreneur. Some like placing their bets on the earlier up and comer. I mean, the difference is for them is the more experienced entrepreneur, they're just not going to get as much of the company. The less experienced entrepreneur, they can get more of the company, but maybe it's a higher risk. There's a ton of data out there. The large tech companies, by and large, the founders are in their 30s and 40s. The stereotype is this kind of like fresh out of school, developer turned founder. And it's true, there's a lot. Like I was first funded pretty early on, but then averages, the actual data points to this kind of quieter, 30s, 40s. They've done a couple of companies. So statistically, if I was going to gamble, I'd say try and get a bit of experience.
That's cool.
But at the end of the day, it's all just a means to the end. I think a lot of people get confused chasing the money as the objective, but really all the money does is give you a ticket to work harder and longer. So it's better to focus on the problem and think about the money as a temporary distraction. It's like you wouldn't launch a company to go and get a bank loan.
Right.
You don't chase the bank loan, but a lot of people do get themselves tied up as like raising the money is the end goal. And that gets your incentives misaligned.
That makes sense. So Bryce, before I get into my next question, do you have anything else on this topic? Because it's a little bit of a left turn.
I was just kind of curious, like based on kind of what you've talked about already, did you work on some of these same companies with the same people, or were these like different companies with different groups of people? And how did you decide what to go work on next?
That's such a good question. So I'm lucky enough to have a couple of people that have been with me through multiple companies. So our lead engineer, Derek, has actually been with me at all of them. And I mean, we're super close. Met each other in high school. He was the best man at my wedding.
Nice.
He met his wife at our house, like as kids when we were playing. So it's, really great close connection. I've been lucky enough to have family work together. The joint venture I mentioned earlier was actually with my mother's firm. So for a while, my mother was our COO. And right now in our latest company, my sister is one of my co-founders. She was an employee at a previous company and just did such amazing work. She actually it was one of the founders for this company. So
that's cool.
Yeah, I'm really lucky. I've also done it badly. I've had friendships that have fallen apart about the companies. I've hired friends where that didn't work out. So I don't mean to paint it as all roses. There's definitely ups and downs. Not everybody is comfortable separating. Like it's like, I'm wearing the work hat now. Let's have a work conversation versus now we're having friends time. Let's not talk about work. Not everybody's comfortable with that. And sometimes you have to be able to do that.
Yeah. Finding good people to do good work with seems to be like the recurring, the thing to go for.
Absolutely.
If you can have the right people on your team, then you can pretty much do whatever you guys want to set your mind to.
That's it, exactly. And then when you have that team, that's the team that helps define your values, your culture, the product that you're building. So all that ends up being collaborative and much easier when you have the right people.
So I'm super interested in the social responsibility side of what you do and some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who spend a lot of time stressing about how they should think about their CSR work.
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of early stage entrepreneurs that say, okay, great, when I made money, I'm gonna give a bunch away. And so they kind of kick the can down the road. Or a lot of venture-backed companies where the CEOs are like, oh, I'd really love to be able to give, but I give personally because we're working with our investors' money. And they kind of say, hey, it would not be appropriate for us to give that money away.
Right.
And I think personally, I think both of those are wrong. I think they're simplifying the question. So one of the things that we've always done with all of our companies is thought about within our means, how do we make the world a better place while we're doing what we do? So early on, one of our first companies, one of the first things we recognized is we don't have a lot of cash. So we can't just go and give big donations, but what do we have? Well, we've got time. So right away, we had a volunteer time off policy. So yes, on top of your vacation time, your sick time, everybody could use 2 days a month to go volunteer if they wanted. Totally optional. They'd record it. We'd share those stats with the team. It was a give of time. We also implemented a donation program. So every time we sent out an invoice, we indicated that, we donate 1% of our revenues to a cause. So great, we just invoiced you for $1,000. 1% of that we're going to donate. But would you like to round this? And it would be an ask at the bottom. It's like, there's the pay slip. Do you want to round out the payment and make a donation too? And what we actually found was almost half of our customers would round up the payment.
Oh, that's cool.
It was super cool. And it's like, well, we don't have a lot of cash, but we like sending invoices. So let's talk about that. So we've always tried to bake it in. It's like within our means, how do we do this early on? And that's carried through. So even all the way to now with our current company, we run a sales training school. There's no obvious, you can't just donate product. Like there's no it's not like when you're producing food, you can donate it to the food bank. But we did a couple of things. Number one, we created a community foundation, a program with the community foundation. So the company, we donated the seed, $5,000 to get this started. But what we do is we actually have all of our employees, optionally, they get the option when they sign up to donate a percentage of each paycheck. And we're not asking for a lot. We say, hey, as a company, we'd like to be able to donate 1% of our gross payroll. So, if we're paying people $100,000, it'd be good if we do donate $1,000 out of that. And we really were very deliberate about it. So as the CEO, I don't actually know who's donating. We've separated out the responsibilities. So I can't give people special benefits or penalize them, but I could see the gross numbers and we're actually donating 1.4%. That's super exciting.
Nice.
Yeah. And it's going into an endowment. So even if there's lean times, we can't do it, someone buys the company and they don't like this idea, that endowment will always be there. So yeah, that's cool. We think a lot about it.
Yeah. Awesome, I've worked with some companies that were B Corp, certified B Corps in the past. And then I've worked with some that did, it was 1% for the planet that they donated to. And in addition to 1% for the planet, that's what they did essentially is set up it wasn't a volunteer time off, but they had like days where the whole company would go out and do certain things, certain activities, clean up the beach or whatever it is that 1% for the planet was putting on in the area that day. And it made such a big impact on me just seeing something that's historically known for corporate greed going out and actually doing the opposite. So.
Totally. The part that's, I think, interesting and I would challenge most entrepreneurs on is to really think about it from the perspective of the organizations you're helping. Like, I loved your example and that in tech companies in particular, they'll do that a lot. Like, we're going to go volunteer. We're going to do, pack bags or boxes at the food bank. We're going to build houses with Habitat for Humanity. It's a team building thing. And they focus on the volunteering because they want to do team building. And that's good. That's helpful. But the reality is, sometimes organizations don't need time. And so, entrepreneurs will then say, well, okay, great. When we have an exit, we'll donate money. So we'll do the 1% pledge. We'll donate 1% of our equity. And we've done it. Same thing. We've given 1% of our company to a foundation. When we eventually sell the company, they'll get a big check and they'll disperse it.
That's cool.
But same thing. Sometimes organizations don't need money sometime in the future. Sometimes they need money now. And yes, we don't have a lot of cash that we can donate, but we do spend a lot. So we pay our people really well. Well, let's remind them that they can donate. Let's make it easy for them to do that. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't necessarily think about what do organizations need right now.
Right.
And across the
That's
board
cool.
in Canada and US, donation volumes are dropping, donors are aging. So there's an opportunity as entrepreneurs to make a big difference there.
That's cool.
I saw a study on there was an e-commerce site that would allow people to donate like $1 at the end of every purchase. And they said that they were able to donate like, I mean, I think it's been tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, just by giving people that option. So I think that idea of making it kind of like immediate and making it easy is really valuable, and something, yeah, a lot of us could definitely learn from.
I think immediate, easy, but also leading by example. Michael, you had that great example of the company doing these events and challenging your assumptions and framework. I think we live in a time where those kind of point and click donations are so easy for us. We see them all the time. And I see this right now in my own staff. I'll see some staff members who grew up in a family of philanthropy, and yeah, they donate $5,000, $10,000 a year because it's what you do from their social network. And then I've got other employees who are like, oh yeah, I've got a friend who's doing a fundraiser, like a bike-a-thon or a run-a-thon, and I'm going to donate to cancer. And yeah, I donated a couple $100 this year, and they feel good about it too. And it's just because they had a different context.
Yeah.
So education is important. And I think as leaders, as entrepreneurs, even if you don't have a lot of money to donate right now, or even if you don't believe in a specific cause, I think you naturally have a podium you can speak from to your staff, to your audience, and taking the time to add that in. I remember I had an engineer who came to me. We talked about the idea of, yeah, donating 1% is not that much. You can donate, you make $100,000. You could donate $1,000. And like, you never actually.
A year.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And the engineer came to me. She's like, I actually hadn't even really thought about that. Yeah, I just had not a clue. Sure.
Yeah, I like how you reframe it too, where it's not like, what can we do, to be socially good, but it's like, how can we take the package that we have today, something that's already realistic and attainable, and reshape that or reframe that to do social good in a way that will impact positively these other organizations. It's a cool way to look at it.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned the B Corps, because it's a great way to do it. Like just the way you run your business, you institutionalize it, you set that expectation. There's a lot of companies doing really good work through that program.
Yeah, I love what I've seen. I've gone to a couple conferences about them specifically, and it's just such a neat concept to really change the pace of like how organizations are run.
The part that's also really good is they have an amazing onboarding. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're listening to this podcast, check out the B Corp website, because they've got this great self-test guide, this onboarding process. It is, when you look at the whole thing, it's so daunting, but they actually break it down really easily.
Mike, do you want to just tell what a B Corp is real quick, just for anyone who doesn't know?
So to my understanding, the way that I've understood this, there's two different structures. There's the B Corp is like a legal entity that you can set up, and then the B Corp certificate
organization.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's just like an S Corp or C Corp, but a B Corp. And then the benefit corporation certificate, I think is what it's called, is like a certification that you go through where you essentially pledge to do good. But the difference, to my knowledge, what I've learned about it, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's that you essentially put into your business plan how you're going to make the world a better place. Like, what is your social impact or your environmental impact or whatever it is that you want to put in there. And it's part of your actual business to do those things. And there's some huge companies doing that, Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's and a bunch of big guys out there.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Like baking it right into your business planning, your values, your vision. But they also require some actual governance changes as well, like putting things into your bylaws, putting things into policy, adding arm's length responsibility so you can't undo it. There's a lot of thought that's gone into it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that's super cool. Well, hey man, just transitioning a little bit. So I'm curious, like what your day-to-day kind of looks like these days now as, like the founder and CEO of a larger company, and having done this a while. What do you spend kind of the most of your time actually doing?
The best description that I've heard came from another founder, the CEO of Vidyard, used this analogy. I thought it was perfect. as you're growing a rapidly scaling company, it's kind of like, imagine you've got this giant cartoon dam and there's like leaks that are popping, and your job is to go and like plug that hole, figure out what's the shape of it, how do you patch it, and once you know that answer, get somebody else to take it over and go and plug the next hole. So my day to day is spent kind of running around, plugging holes, spending time with the team, and removing roadblocks so that they can then run with that challenge. So I'll be spending time with our classes, either teaching specific subjects or working on the scalability or bringing in instructors, chatting with marketing as we think about ad campaigns and systems, and then switching over and chatting with finance so that we can streamline the way we, collect money or send money internationally. So it's a little bit all over the map, back to back, a lot of meetings. Really, my job is to help make some decisions, but remove roadblocks from my team because they're the ones who do the real work.
That's cool.
I like it. That's a good analogy too.
Yeah.
Cool. And then my last question is like, do you have any, again, having done this a bunch of times, do you have kind of like a secret weapon or a best tip for how to like grow startups at this stage?
It's funny when I think about any kind of secret tips or items, usually there's somebody else who's written about this and talked about it much better than I. The one thing that I've brought up a lot that often seems to be a little bit different is the way you write down your core values. And this is funny because not a lot of people say, hey, the core to founding our company was our core values, but I challenge entrepreneurs to say it should be. I mean, very often entrepreneurs don't write these down early. And so the company evolves and grows. And one day they look back at the company and they say, hey, we have a culture and maybe there's some problems with it. Now I got to write it down. I got to change it. And it's so hard to change something that already exists. Whereas early on, if you write down the type of company you want to be, the values that you stand for, the things that are important, they can act as a beacon, as a light, but it also gives you the framework to bring the right people on. Because if you don't write it down, it's really, really hard to say you're the right kind of person that I want to have join me on this crazy journey. But if you can write down the values and the behaviors that demonstrate those values, that's going to be a lot better. So
that's cool.
Yeah, taking the time to actually document those, even when it's just one or two of you, write it down. Think about how you're going to use that to hire the right people. It's going to save you so much stress down the road.
I'm such a fan of putting things down on paper, even if it's like something super small that you're going to remember. And there's something about just transferring it down to either like typing it out or writing it down with a pen on a piece of paper that really just transforms it into a physical thing that changes everything in my mind, at least.
It's so true. And it's funny, we've seen how that's translated into even our training. So as we do our sales training, one of the things that we do early on with our classes is ask our students about the types of companies they want to work for. Because people are hiring salespeople, but when you're interviewing, you're interviewing the company too. So sit and write down the things that are important to you. What's the type of role that you want? And we use that in our matching process. And again, it makes it so much easier for people to have successful careers when they can frame things up in terms of values themselves.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think there's so much opportunity out there. And if you can use your values as like a way to filter who you end up working with, it just makes it so easy to push aside all the stuff that you don't want to be dealing with, which leaves the space to work with the stuff that you do. So that's super smart, man. I like that a lot as like a way to build that into the very beginning with intention.
Mm-hmm. And it holds you accountable to it too. Because the reality is, it is like, good example, one of our values is a balance of play and responsibility. Let's have fun, but let's not forget the responsibility we have to our clients. And straight up, it is the one I personally struggle with the most, because my idea of a good time is to get shit done. So the team is always reminding me, hey, let's take a break, Joseph. Let's go and have a bit of fun. And it's good because, yes, I want to have that environment. And it is not my natural tendency. So it helps me bring in people who make up for my shortcomings. So
that's cool.
I like it a lot.
So we're getting down to the end here. We've got a couple, a little bit of a fun thing we like to do at the end with just some lightning round questions.
Absolutely.
If you're down for it, we've got 3 listed out for you.
Let's go.
Cool. So the first one is, what is your favorite book or podcast?
Oh, with book, I'm going to have to go with Les Miserables. What a great story, and one of the ones that is a big tearjerker. So I'm going to have to go with that.
Nice.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What would you say is the best habit you've developed that's helped you in your entrepreneurial journey?
Oh, writing things down from the shopping list to the values. If I don't write it down, it's not going to happen. So find a good to-do list to have, get those things documented, the moments in your head, write it down and share it with people. Because if your team sees, if your spouse sees what's on the to-do list, you're committing. So be sure to write it down in a shared way.
Can't cross it off or erase it on your own.
No, that's it. Exactly. It's like, no, look, I did pick up the milk. I knew I was going to do it because you're watching it too.
That's awesome. So the last one is, if you had to start, or I guess start another business, in your case, not your business all over again, but if you had to start another business, what are some of the first things that you would do?
Man, how do I say, just replicate what I'm doing again, because I love what I'm doing. Hands down, best thing has always been just talking to customers. What are the problems you have that we can solve? And that's going to lead you in the right direction. You can follow those bright spots and end up with a successful company.
We had an interview with a gentleman named Jeroen last week, and that's exactly what he said, was just spend way more time talking to customers instead of developing the product.
Absolutely. The customers tell you where the bright spots are, like where you solve the problem, where they'll spend money. And your job as an entrepreneur is to just follow those bright spots until you can do that with scale.
It's wild how simple it is sometimes, right? Just talk to people.
I know. That's it. Step 1, talk to people. Step 2, profit. There we go.
That's awesome.
Awesome, man.
Figured it out, guys. Talk to people, make money. That's awesome. Well, Joseph, I don't have anything else. This has been great.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing all your wisdom.
Likewise, Bryce, Michael, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me here.
Totally.